Hello, hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for that kind introduction, Sydney. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen here. So let's see if it comes through. All right. Can everybody see that? Yep. All right. Awesome. All right, so hello. Thank you for being here on taking some time out of your Wednesday afternoon. I know everybody is wrapping up their fall semester before the holidays, so I deeply appreciate your time and hope that we can learn from each other today. And I just want to give a huge thank you to Bridget and Sydney for coordinating these workshops, doing all the heavy lifting behind the scenes. I know it takes a lot to put on these workshops, so we all appreciate that. As Sydney mentioned, my name is Michelle Hassel. Today I'll be talking about photography and how adding perspective and personality to your imagery can create more engagement. For those who attended the Social Media Summit back in the spring, this presentation might sound fairly familiar, but it does have some new content, so hopefully it can bring some new insight as well. Also, shout out to that U of I Instagram led by Leah Peck and August Chess, who is on maternity leave right now. Big shout out. It's awesome. All right. Cool. Okay, so I work for the Public Affairs Office, which is soon to be known as the Office of Strategic Communications and Marketing. I am their senior photographer. I've been in this role since February, so I'm approaching my 1-year anniversary pretty soon. And I have been working in higher education for several years. So previously at Illinois State University as their photographer, and prior to that at Millikan University as their photographer and videographer. Within public affairs, soon to be the Office of Strategic Communications and Marketing, still training my tongue how to say that. My main responsibilities include creating imagery and managing administration for the Illinois Image Database, creating content for our university social media accounts, photographing work for hire events for various departments and units across campus, taking studio portraits of faculty and staff for website updates and award ceremonies, and then shooting for the News Bureau team once in a while who release stories featuring the amazing research happening on campus and any other photographic need that may arise. So it's a very big job, but I absolutely love what I do and I feel very privileged to do it. So let's talk about photography. There are a billion topics underneath the photography umbrella. In fact, using umbrellas is even a topic within photography, ironically. So we won't be able to cover everything within this hour, but I hope what does get covered is beneficial to each person in some way. So these are the main topics that I'd like to chat about today. We'll cover available lighting for portraits, what creates strong composition, technical aspects such as aperture, shutter speed, and ISO, when to use unique perspectives, how to capture anticipated moments, what impact color has on your images, the storytelling aspect of photography, how to overcome limited spaces, and when to use photo releases. All right, so let's get into it. Lighting is arguably the most important part of photography. In fact, the word photography literally means drawing with light. So light is the first topic I'd like to cover. When shooting portraits, the quality of light is what I scout out first. Even before searching for an ideal background, that is #1 priority in my mind. So for portraits, soft and diffused lighting is best. Harsh light tends to create really prominent and usually unwanted shadows on people's faces. If you're working with natural light outside on a sunny day, my favorite trick is to find an edge of shade where the subject can stand facing an open area of sky. This allows their face to be evenly lit and illuminated while the background is primarily in shade. So our eyes naturally travel to whatever is brightest in the frame. So having a little bit of a darker background, a little bit more of a muted, subtle background helps eliminate distractions and keeps the focus on the lovely person's face standing in front of you. My unpopular opinion is that overcast days are actually the best and most flexible for portrait sessions because the sky acts as a huge softbox. So the quality of light will be soft and diffused no matter which direction your subject is facing in an open and well-lit area. So morning light and evening light are the most beautiful times of the day as far as directional lighting. So I don't know if anybody's heard of the term golden hour. Golden hour is a term that photographers love to use for that evening light before the sun sets. The light is directional and soft, and shadows are really elongated. So if you have a choice, doing photos either really early in the day or late in the day could pay off in the end. And of course, at this time of year, with it getting dark so early, it's probably more midday instead of at the end of the day. Good old daylight savings, am I right? Whew, hopefully this is the last year. So let's talk about the direction of light. Light coming from directly above a subject can cause raccoon eyes and a shadow underneath the nose that kind of bleeds into somebody's lip. So if you think about sunlight at noon that's directly above, it's really harsh. It's bringing those shadows down from everything that has a little bit more structure outside of the face. Let's see. So yeah, lighting from above, noon light, not so great. Light coming from below can cause like a scary ghost story vibe, bonfire lighting look, which is not necessarily natural for our eyes to see. Light from the side shows a lot of texture. So this is a great technique for architecture or nature photography, but in portraits, this can show skin texture such as wrinkles or pronounced blemishes, things that you might not want to show off. Light coming from behind a subject causes silhouetting. So if you imagine somebody standing in front of a sunset, you can usually just see the outline of their shape. Light pointed directly at a subject can cause a very flat look and tends to lose dimension. So you also want to be careful about that. So let's talk about the most ideal angle of lighting. When it comes to soft light, when we're talking about like the very open, diffused lighting, about 45 degrees above your subject is going to be the best angle to show for portraiture. In harsh sunlight, though, without shade as an option, you probably want to turn your subject so that the sun is actually behind them at a 45-degree angle over one of their shoulders. So we like to see faces illuminated in a really natural way and a natural angle. So if you think about that light coming from below, we never have a sun that's below us. And that's why that light looks really, really unnatural to us. So whenever you're lighting a portrait session, you want the light source to look as if it's gleaming from above. So if you'd like to have homework after this presentation for my type A overachievers in the room, the next time you're in front of a mirror, go ahead and use the light on your phone and point it at your face in different directions, and you'll notice the shadows, and you'll see the shadow beneath your nose change, and you'll see the light in your eyes change as you move the light. Then if you want to point the light into the mirror, you'll see that it's actually manipulating the light to bounce off of a surface. So because it has more distance to spread between your phone to the mirror and the mirror to your face, it becomes much more diffused, and you'll see that the shadows on your face are no longer as harsh. So this technique, it can also be used when bouncing light off of a surface. So it could be ceilings or white walls or a bright sidewalk. You want to keep in mind what your main light source might be reflecting off of. All right, so when taking portraits indoors, and we're talking with natural light, available light, we want to look for windows. Window light is my best friend, and I promise I do have human best friends as well, but window light is up there. I adore window light. So it acts in the same way as facing a diffused sky, like we talked about, with a shaded background. It lights up the eyes and illuminates the face in a very natural way. And if no windows are available, just avoid placing your subject directly below a fluorescent light bulb. So we're thinking about that light at noon that's right above the face can cause raccoon eyes and some unwanted shadows. So try to pose them in a way where their face is angled either up towards the light or the light source is angled behind them. When working with available light, I hope this gives some ideas to try out. We do still have power in the decisions we make, even if we can't move the sun ourselves. All right, so when it comes to composition, photographers love to talk about the rule of thirds. This is a practice where a subject is positioned offset in a frame, not directly in the center. If you can imagine an image divided evenly into thirds, both horizontally and vertically, the subject would land on one of the intersected cross points. Using the rule of thirds adds a lot of interest to your images, and it's a great rule to use when you until you know when to break it or exaggerate it. So placing a subject directly in the center is used when showing dominance or power in an image. Usually this style works best with backgrounds that enhance the symmetry. So if you already have a symmetrical background, this is when you could break the rule naturally. Or you can exaggerate composition. So you can place the subject close to the edge of the frame, allowing more negative space. So negative space is yet another term that photographers love to use. In art, this refers to the empty space around or between subjects. Extra space in a frame allows the eye to bounce around and have more room to breathe before coming back to focusing on the subject. When all you have is access to a wall and a subject, don't forget that negative space is still a very creative force in your favor. In fact, when shooting for social media or magazine layouts or anything that might incorporate an element of design, negative space is a wonderful way to add text and graphics over an image without it feeling cluttered or cramped. It also allows for a little bit more flexibility in cropping as well, depending on the usage of the image. All right, so if you're not sure of a photo's final purpose at the time of your shoot, shoot multiple options and make some lemonades with the lemons that you've been given. If your subjects are willing to give a few more minutes of their time, try out some different poses and some different angles and different perspectives. Pose them differently, make them, change their position or walk around them for different backgrounds. Shoot horizontally and vertically. Have fun with them, be silly, whatever it takes. Your future self will thank you for having different options to work with in the end, depending on how the photos get utilized. So on this slide, for example, there are 6 different shoots included in this slide. Each of these students were gracious enough to lend me a little bit more of their time, and each photo has a different feel from the next, and they could be used for different purposes, depending if they're close up, shot a little wider, horizontal, vertical. Even though it was just one encounter, we kind of made the most of the time we had together. So keep that in mind when you're shooting. All right. So let's talk a little bit about some technical aspects of photography. There are 3 main components that make up exposure. Exposure is a fancy word that means how much light reaches your camera, therefore how bright or dark your photo turns out. These 3 settings on your camera that dictate exposure are aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. So imagine a pie chart, if you will. When one of these components is adjusted, the other 2 have to compensate to keep the same exposure. So when shooting in automatic, your camera is kind of figuring out these settings for you and making the most of what it thinks the camera needs. Camera lenses replicate how our eyes function. So shutter speed can be compared to how long our eyes are open. The longer they're open, the more light is being let in. ISO would be compared to how sensitive our eyes are to the light. And aperture would be compared to the size of our pupils. So have you ever noticed that your pupils are enlarged when you're in a low light space? This is the pupil trying to let in as much light as possible to see in the dark. That's why it's hard to see in the dark when you first turn off the lights, because your eyes are still adjusting to the darkness and they're dilating during this process. In the bright light, though, our pupils are much smaller because they don't need to let in as much light. There's plenty of light available. So same with the camera lens. This component of aperture is the one I want to focus on, no pun intended, because it determines depth of field. So depth of field is the distance of focus in your image. Shallow depth of field is a very small focal plane where everything in front of and behind your subject will fall out of focus. For example, go ahead and take a look at the photo on the left of the snowy portrait of the professor wearing a scarf. If you can see that the snowflakes in front of him and behind him and the building, they're all out of focus. So this is an example of shallow depth of field. The only thing that's in focus is his eyes, his face, part of his shirt, part of his scarf. So this is shallow depth of focus. So if we want to look at this example here, you'll see that the snowflakes have actually created what photographers call bokeh. This is the out of focus renderings caused by the lens. And fun fact, the shape of these renderings emulates the shape of the lens. So if I had a star-shaped lens, all of these snowflakes would actually be in the shape of stars. In college, when I was studying photography, we actually made lenses out of Starbucks lids and made the design however we wanted to create different shapes of bokeh. So fun fact, if you don't have a lens, a Starbucks lid will work. Okay, so putting more distance in between your subject and your background allows for this shallow depth of field effect. If you're photographing a person in front of a building, let as much space live in between your subject and the background as possible if you want this shallow depth of field effect. Now go ahead and take a look at the scenic photo in the middle here of the Bardeen Quad. So you can notice that everything in the foreground to the background, from the people to the building, everything is in focus because this is what's called a large depth of field. You'll want larger depth of field when photographing groups of people. So not just one person is in focus, every single person in the group is in focus, or when photographing wide campus shots. All right. So speaking back to the type A overachievers in the room, if you're ready for some homework, I'd like to request some. So let's do this one together though. I want you to hold your right pointer finger in front of your face about 5 inches in front, okay? And then with your left hand, go ahead and place it on your cheek so that you can see the tips of your fingers in the peripheral. All right, thanks for doing this with me, Bridget. You're a sport. Bridget's like, oh, I wish I had my screen turned off. All right, so let's all focus on this pointer finger here in front of us on the right hand. Okay, so your eyes are focusing on that. As your eyes are focused there, I want you to go ahead and realize that everything behind that finger and everything in front, including the tips of your fingers that you can see in your peripheral, it's all out of focus when your focus is on that pointer finger. All right, and go ahead and take that left hand and I want you to move it out towards your finger. You see how it comes into focus? And if you bring it past and take it behind, it goes right out of focus if you're still focusing on that pointer finger. Okay, so this is an example of focal plane. So wherever your point of focus in, wherever that distance is, whatever is at the same distance, that's what's going to be in focus. Okay, so you can relax. Thanks for humoring me with your hands now. Appreciate it. All right, so if you've ever heard of f-stops in photography, the f-stop is the setting for aperture, which controls the depth of field. F-stop with small numbers such as f1.2 through f2.8 are very shallow depth of field numbers. So think about the dilated pupil in the dark room. This is where we need more light let in because it's a dark circumstance, or we want that shallow depth of field. So whereas f-stops with large numbers such as f16 through f22, those are large depth of field. So if you think about the tiny pupils on a sunny day, we don't need as much light to be let in. For those who take photos on their iPhones, you can go ahead and take a look at portrait mode. And there's an F button at the top right of your screen that will, you'll be able to choose your depth of field in portrait mode when taking photos. So I don't know if you've ever noticed that, but it is possible to choose this even when taking photos on an iPhone. So scrolling to f1.4 on your phone will give you the effect of very shallow depth of field. And if you're scrolling to the right for f16, that'll give you very wide depth of field. So it's nice to know, even if you want to shoot automatic on your iPhone, you can still choose your depth of field. All right, so on the previous slide, we talked about aperture, which controls the focus point. Now let's talk about shutter speed, which has to do with, you guessed it, speed. So zoom before zoom was a thing, right? So let's go back to our eye analogy. When you think of shutter speed, think of the concept of blinking, except it's kind of in a reverse way since our eyes are mostly open with quick blinks and the camera lens is mostly closed with quick moments of being open. Shutter speed is the length of time that your lens is open, letting light flood in. So the quicker the shutter speed, the less light it invites. And the slower the shutter speed, the more light gets let in. When you're photographing a moving object, you want to pay attention to what shutter speed your settings are at. These are the numbers written in fractions. So 1/40th, 1/40, means that your camera shutter will be open 1/40th of a second. That might sound fast to us, but actually with shutter speed, that's actually a slower number. So fractions like 1/2000, that means that your camera shutter is open for 1/2000th of a second, which is very quick. So the larger the number and the harder to pronounce, the faster the shutter speed. Fast shutter speeds are used for freezing motion without blur. Slow shutter speeds are used for showing motion blur, but if that's not the effect that you're looking for, be careful to show or to set slow shutter speeds because they won't only show the motion of your subject, they'll also show the motion of the camera being handheld. So for slower shutter speeds, a tripod is usually necessary. As hard as we try to hold our hands still, the camera still can see a little bit of movement if our hands are not perfectly still. So take a peek at the light trail photo on the left of this slide. What do we know about this photo? It's taken at night, which means a quick shutter speed wouldn't let in enough light to show the scene, right? It would be just a pitch black photograph. So it's taken with a slow shutter speed on a tripod, and the shutter speed is stopped down far enough for the cars to travel all the way around the roundabout. So the shutter has been open that entire time, that entire route. The shutter was open for several seconds for this photo, for this effect. And for the scene to remain sharp, I had to use the camera on a tripod so it didn't show any motion. So now take a look at the bottom right photo. I apologize that this photo was taken during my ISU days, but I'm using it for educational purposes, so it's fine, right? So what do we know about this photo? It's taken in a gym, so that means low light, but the motion is frozen in this one, and it was shot with it was shot without a tripod, excuse me. So if this shutter speed had to be set at a faster setting and it was handheld, how is it still exposed correctly? Okay, so that's where the third piece of our pie chart comes in, ISO. ISO stands for International Organization of Standardization. You will probably never need to know that, so FYI, random information. ISO, if we go back to our eye analogy, is the sensitivity to light. So when someone suddenly turns your lights on at 3 a.m. while you were fast asleep for hours, your eyes are more sensitive to that light. The light source itself is no brighter than it would be during the middle of the day, but the sensitivity is what's changed. So bumping up our ISO to larger numbers is telling the camera, hey, we're about to be in a low light scenario where we need large depth of field for focus, and we can't have motion blur from the subject matter or from me holding the camera. So what's the answer? ISO. Changing your ISO is the only slice of the pie chart where there's a little dance you have to do in a balancing act type of way. And why is that? The higher the ISO, the grainier the photo will appear. And in the photo world, we talk about grain referred to as noise. That's the word used for it. So if you didn't know a photo could be noisy, now you do. And this slide is full of many noisy photos, including the lady on the far right at the bottom, who is quite literally screaming, but it's also noisy from ISO. So if your quality of light is ideal and you're not in a low light situation, keep your ISO set low, and that'll avoid the noise or the grain, as people sometimes call it. So between settings like 100 to 400 is what I would consider low before you start noticing some noise start to creep in. Okay, now that we've discussed the technicals, the dry stuff, let's jump back to the fun stuff. So using unique perspectives, there are different psychologies behind photographing from different angles. Shooting from a low and wide perspective communicates empowerment, strength, drama, emphasis, distortion, and can place your subject as the hero of the scene, as if they're larger than life and the world is theirs. When photographing people, crossed arms can also symbolize this. So be cautious when you're shooting from below though, because it's not always the most flattering angle for people. Sometimes it can show a little too much under the chin, and sometimes it makes people's heads look a little smaller than their body in an unproportional way. Shooting from above has the opposite effect. It can signify submission and being small, but this angle typically looks very flattering for portraits. Shooting from above emphasizes a person's face and eyes more than the rest of their body. And we always kind of want focus on the eyes in photography. And it can also make their chin and their neck and their shoulders look slimmer. So if we have anybody in the group today who is what we would call vertically challenged, if there's nothing else that you take from this presentation, take this as a compliment that the world just sees you as amazing. You know, you've got the best perspective. Hopefully this is a good confidence boost for you. And for those who are taller, just know that you own the world. So confidence all around. So be creative in your perspectives when shooting. There's always ways to make uninteresting things look more interesting. Let other subjects frame your main subject, such as shooting through shoulders. Use leading lines or repetition in your image to bring focus to your subjects. If you're shooting against a wall, shoot from an angle rather than straight on. It's always way more interesting and will lead the audience's eye towards the person. Be aware of your background and any unwanted distractions. Avoid poles or trees sticking out of people's heads, and try to use the backgrounds in a way that best frame your subject rather than distract from it. For example, take a look at the image on the right, on the top, with the glass window of walls. So the window panes created repetition and leading lines diagonally across the frame. I asked her to lean against this particular part of the window so no lines would be interfering with her head, and could instead act as an additional frame for her. If I had photographed this straight on, the image would be much less dynamic with the lines. 90% of candid photography is people watching. It sounds super creepy and I get paid for it, which makes it even creepier. But waiting for the right second to capture a moment can make all the difference in bringing your imagery to life. So especially in this generation, we love to see posed portraits that look as if they were taken candidly. When photographing events, read the room, anticipate when laughter might break out during a conversation, or when two friends are about to greet one another with a wave or a hug. Find the people who have glowing smiles and joy in their eyes. And when a smile or laugh breaks out in the room, be there to snap away. But be patient and wait for those moments to arise because they'll be pure joy when you catch them. When photographing portraits, remember that the person in front of you has a wonderful personality to offer, and you have the privilege of showing it to the world. So make them feel comfortable. If they're camera shy, build them up with encouragement. Remember that it can always be very, very awkward to have a camera pointed at you and to be put on the spot. So if there's time, get to know one another before the photo shoot so you can build a foundation of trust while they're in a state of vulnerability. Comfortability will show in somebody's body language as well, so you will see it in the photo too. If they're open to it, have them do something silly to ease the nerves. So let them know it's a judgment-free space. Have them buzz their lips if their smile gets tense, or have them shake out the tension if their posture is stiff. Ask for them to give you a fake laugh, because 9 times out of 10 it'll turn into a genuine laugh, and there's your moment. There's, the moment you've been waiting for. Especially if they're in a group and you share this weird request to have a fake laugh. A lot of times that fake laughter will turn into real laughter, and real laughter is contagious. Letting people's personalities shine through your photography is the best gift in the world. And I truly believe that there's immense beauty to show in every human that we photograph. So we talked about the psychology in shooting from different angles, but there's also psychology in the use of color. To name a few, red symbolizes action, passion, energy, and excitement. Orange brings optimism, enthusiasm, creativity, and success. Of course, success for Illinois orange. Yellow symbolizes joy, happiness, cheer, and warmth. Green is nature, healing, harmony, and safety. Blue is loyalty, purpose, trust, confidence, stability, and also success. Again, rightfully so, with it being Illinois' colors. Purple is mystery, imagination, royalty, and luxury. Some colors even have a physical effect on us. So did you know that warmer colors such as red, orange, and yellow can actually cause us to feel hungrier? So now, if you walk into restaurants, you'll know if they've done their color theory studies when you see the choice of paint on their walls. Lighter colors can feel open and airy, whereas dark colors can feel really heavy and negative. In fact, there are different psychologies of color depending on what part of the world you live in. For example, in Western culture, we associate mourning with the color black, but in Middle Eastern culture, it's associated with orange, and in Far Eastern and Indian cultures, it's associated with brown. I found that so fascinating, and if you want to do an image Google search for psychology of color, light versus dark, and you're fascinated by this stuff, as I am, you will probably lose all track of time and space into a very deep journey on the internet. So if you didn't have plans for tonight, there you go. By the way, if you're curious how much effort I put into making this slide look like a rainbow for your viewing satisfaction, you now know that I care way too deeply about you. Yes, okay, so orange and blue. Let's talk about branding, the colors of success as we have recently learned. We are so fortunate to have these colors paired up as our university colors. First of all, they're complementary colors, which truly do complement each other and are very much on brand. Secondly, they're bold and punchy, vibrant, poppy, and striking colors. Thirdly, they're often found in natural scenes together. Have you ever noticed this? Especially during fall foliage. If you start looking for scenes where orange and blue meet in nature, you'll begin to realize how often it happens. And you probably never unsee it now that I've seeped into your subconscious. So you're very welcome. So think about the blue skies and water against orange leaves and architecture. It's also possible to construct the combination of these colors intentionally. If you find a beautiful orange backdrop, seek out somebody wearing a blue shirt or vice versa. It can be subtle, yet it's still very effective for branding purposes. Vibrant colors make for engaging photos. We can use our Alma-given gifts to our advantage. Let orange and blue shine in your images. At least you'll get brownie points in my book if you do. When choosing environment, props, apparel, or any other preconceived aspect of your photo shoot, let the subject matter add to the story. So there's always a story to tell behind every image, and that's why we share images in the first place. Viewers enjoy being able to tell what's happening as soon as they're able to see an image, even if they haven't read a caption or text that fills in the details with what the image portrays. In this slide, you can see an audiologist at work during the pandemic wearing a see-through mask so her hard of hearing patients can still read her lips. There's a professor whose research involves how Latin dance lessons may boost memory and cognitive function. You'll see a boxer who is getting ready to practice in the gym, a painter who commissions murals on buildings to beautify his town, an entomologist professor searching for insects in a wooded preserve to show his class, a student whose lifelong dream has been to work as a manager for the hotel industry because he grew up living in hotels himself. And finally, you'll see a chemist who's handling an extremely fatal chemical, the same one used in Breaking Bad, which eats through all materials except for one specific type of plastic. So without telling you which image relates to which story, context clues kind of give away the narrative because of the elements that are added into each photo, whether it's props or location, everything that you can add to the story. Photos can be a very powerful form of sharing stories with others, so let your images speak up without noise from your ISO settings this time. Noisy photos, if you listen, you get it. All right. Now, I know many photo shoots happen in dark, yellow labs on campus or in classrooms that were constructed back in 1867 when the university was just a newborn. Even if the room is less than ideal, photographers have the ability to show what we want in the frame and disregard the rest. So every image here is photographed with natural light in a room that is less than ideal. In fact, between you and me, some of these locations looked like they could be on the show hoarders. No joke. Yeah. So when you find yourself in these types of circumstances, keep in mind that some of the topics we previously talked about, using different perspectives for interesting angles, framing your subjects with other subjects, shooting shallow depth of field to eliminate background distractions, kind of blur out that background, take photos of close-up details to tell the overall story, think outside of the box, and even shoot outside of the room if a window or doorway allows a more interesting viewpoint. If possible, communicate with professors and students ahead of your arrival. I know this doesn't always happen this way and can be tough, but results are best when both parties have the same goal in mind. Better yet, if taking photos is the main reason for meeting that day, you'll have flexibility to lead and direct without stealing the show from their education purposes. If students are willing, ask that they look presentable for your visit. Most likely they'll be thankful that they did when they see the camera walk into the room with you, and you'll be thankful that they did when having the photos. So teamwork, it's a great thing. Most importantly, ask that the branded clothes are avoided, especially branding for other universities. Illini gear is the way to go. If windows are present in lab spaces or classrooms, use the window light as your main light source and bring the subject as close as possible to that light if you're working with available light. It'll have the same effect as the trick of having the subject stand at the edge of shade facing the open sky outdoors, if you remember when we talked about that. If you don't have the ability to move your subjects during a shoot in a classroom or a lab or whatever, take note of where your main light source is coming from, and then adjust your perspective accordingly. So even if a space is limited, I hope you feel more empowered and know that we do have tools in our toolkit to bring out the best of any scenario. All right, our very last topic of discussion today is the topic of photo releases. So when and who are photo releases necessary for? Releases should be signed by any individual who is personally identifiable in an image, video, or audio recording. When in doubt, use them always. Release forms are accessible through our Public Affairs webpage under the Resources tab, so you can find them there. The hyperlink for talent/model release in blue, as you can see on the left there, will take you to the document shown on the right, which is written in both English and Spanish. The individual can print, sign, and date the document to allow permission for their images to be used for university purposes. We especially want this if it's going to be used commercially to promote or advertise the university or department in any way. It's important to have these documents filed for legal reasons and to show clear proof of consent. Now, if an individual does not want to sign the release for any reason, please be respectful of those boundaries and let it be clear that their image will not be taken. We don't always know what's happening in the student's life, so we want to be sensitive of that. And we want this university to be a place where students feel safe and understood without question. The students, after all, are the reason that we're here. All right, so thank you so much for your time and attention. Thank you for being here today. I really appreciate it. If there's any time for questions, I'd love to stop hearing the sound of my own voice and hear from you now. Thank you so much. Did anybody write anything in the chat that I missed during the presentation?
No questions, but lots of great comments and support.
Thanks, guys.
Hey, Michelle, I got a quick question.
Yeah.
So when you're taking a photo, what is it, and where do you want the subject? I know you mentioned the rule of thirds, but when you're looking through the camera, what is it that you want to see in the center?
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, so if we're taking like candid photography, at an event, we really want to focus in on the subject that we want to photograph, right? So let's say that there's a person that we see who is having a really great time, huge laughter, like just a really, would be a great subject. I usually put them at one of the rule of thirds. So I kind of move them off center just to make them a little bit more appealing in the frame. And then I'll sometimes see if there's like a shoulder that I can shoot over so that can also frame them. So, if their face is like off to the side here and then a shoulder is kind of letting it be an extra frame for them. Whatever your main subject is, you just don't want to have, distractions necessarily right around it. And you also want to think about the light and the direction of light. So let's say, somebody's talking and having that big smile and there's a window next to them, right? So I would usually go and stand in between them and the window because that's where the best light is coming from if I'm not shooting with artificial lighting such as a flash or having lights set up. So does that kind of answer the question?
Yeah, and thanks for explaining what you meant by shooting through the shoulder. I didn't understand that earlier, but that makes sense. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. A lot of times these like candid photographs, it'll be two people talking together. So they'll be kind of standing, looking at one another. So if you're trying to get the front side of one person's face, which we usually want to see more of the front angle rather than profile, you can use that other person's shoulder to kind of, give them an extra frame.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Vincent. Good to see you here.
Virgil Ward also asked in the chat, what camera do you use?
Yeah, so I know we didn't talk too much about camera equipment here. Here at U of I, we use Canon primarily. So right now I've been shooting with the Mark IV. I have two of those. I usually have two cameras on me at all times for different shoots, and I usually have two different lenses. So my go-to lenses are the 24-70, which is more of a wide zoom, and then my secondary lens is the 70-200. So that one's the one I use for close-up candid shots at an event, or if there's a speaker and I'm shooting from the back of the room. That allows, it's a telephoto lens, so it allows for a little bit more distance. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Great. Deborah, you have your hand raised. Would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, I have two questions, Michelle. This was really great, by the way. I really loved hearing you talk and seeing your photos at the same time.
Thanks, Deborah.
On your ISO page, I think it was,
Yeah.
a picture of two people looking at a poster and the guy standing in front of the poster gesturing toward it.
Yeah. So
Um,
let's see if
It was on the left side of the screen.
back. It's catching up with me. My slides are a little slow. I apologize.
Yeah, there it is.
Did I miss it?
Yeah, no, it's
Uh-oh.
on the gold page.
All right, it's probably still working backwards.
Oh,
All right, we'll catch up to it though.
well, my question is, so how did you get everything in that frame in focus as opposed to just a narrow focus or shallow focus on the guy who is giving the presentation? That's how mine usually turn out, and I'm never sure what I'm doing.
Yeah. Okay, so let's see if we can get back to it. I think it's there. It is.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, there it is.
Stay.
It looks to me like they're all in focus.
Yeah, so I was shooting, oh man, I clicked too far. I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm so sorry. My PowerPoint is being very slow. Okay, so that's where large depth of fields comes into play. So those fractions that I had talked about, that's like, f1.2 would be a very shallow depth of field where only a small focal plane would be in focus. That was probably shot at maybe like f 5.6 or f8, which allows for a little bit more distance. So that's how, the focal plane, which let's pretend that the camera is shooting from this direction, right? So the focal plane would be small if your aperture is small. The wider you make it, the more in the frame will be in focus. So that's how, oh, there it was. I looked back to it. Okay, so that's how something like this is also an example of shooting through shoulders. So the shoulders kind of frame him, and he is the focus of the photograph. That's kind of how they wouldn't be super, super blurred out. There's a little bit more depth of field.
Okay, I had one other question. Early in the, like, one of the first things you said was that you had, I think you said you have an unpopular
Yeah.
opinion of where the light should be. And you talked about it, you prefer it being overcast, which I do too, and
Yeah.
and kind of light coming from nowhere. But then later, I think you talked about putting the subject in the, like, on the edge of a portion of shade,
Yeah.
so it'd be dark behind it,
Mhm.
dark behind the subject. But then later, then we talked about having it nice to have light coming from behind, which I've heard of that,
Yeah.
creating that halo effect. So can you talk about those three options? And
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so let's talk about the diffused light first. So let's talk about diffused sky as if like it is one big cloud, right? Like we don't see sun coming from any direction. It's very spread out, diffused directional light. So in that type of scenario, that's the type where for portraits, you can kind of face your subject any direction and it'll be really well lit if their face is facing that light. So let's say that there's a diffused day and you're taking portraits, but you've placed your portrait so that the person is looking straight into a brick wall. Well, that light's not going to be able to flood in their light, in their illuminate their face, right? We have to have them pointed towards the sky for it to be able to illuminate. But with the open sky, you can kind of move them any direction, and with the sky hitting their face, it would illuminate them well, if that makes sense. So for diffused days, you would want that light in front of them, right? Now let's talk about if it's really harsh sunlight. That's the scenario where you would want to place the sun behind their shoulder, off to a 45-degree angle behind them. If it's a 45-degree angle in front of them, you'll see a big shadow of their nose off to the side, and you'll see some of that face texture. It'll look really harsh and they might be squinting, So if you've seen photos where the light is coming from behind, if it's a really harsh sunlight, usually gives that hair rim effect. It can look really, really beautiful and makes for good light. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but you also mentioned that if the light is directly behind them, then it's a silhouette. So you're talking about trying to move the light to that 45-degree angle that makes it so it's not like a silhouette, but it's more in a flattering.
Yeah, so it becomes a silhouette if that person's frame is immediately, directly blocking the sun. So
Okay,
if you're
gotcha.
photographing them and they're standing right in front of the sun, that's why we want the 45-degree angle behind them. So it's not fully silhouetting them, but their face still looks evenly lit with it being to the side. Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks for your questions.
Yeah, thanks for that, Deborah. We had Lauren Laws also in the chat asked, what's the best materials to use for shooting cheat sheets? She says, I can't always remember what settings does what on the fly.
Sure. Yeah, so are you talking about like automatic settings on the camera, Lauren? I put you on the spot.
You're fine. I just thought it'd be better if I just unmuted.
Yeah.
No, I mean, like ISO and f-stop and everything. The last photography class I took was when I was an undergrad, and I'm 33 years old now. If that gives you any perspective.
Sure.
So I can't quite remember everything on the fly on what does what, because a lot of the photographs I used to do were in nightclubs or very moody photographs. So really, really dark.
Yeah, so the dark ones, the dark locations are probably the best for shooting in manual, and that's when you would have to bump up your ISO, even though it'll add a little bit of noise to the photo, right? We want to bump up that ISO so it's not just a dark frame. You'd want to bump down your aperture, so a little lower number of that fraction. However much, if you're wanting shallow depth of field, then you can bump it down quite a bit. If you're still wanting some distance, keep it a little bit more middle range. And then your shutter speed, you'd want it to be as slow as possible without losing motion. So a good rule of thumb is however long your lens is, like let's say I'm using the 70 to 200, I wouldn't want to go any lower than shutter speed set at 1/200th of a second. 1/200 is what the setting would say. So there are different settings on your camera, kind of halfway automatic. So you have the fully automatic setting, and then you also have fully manual where you're choosing all of those options, right? And then there's a thing called aperture priority, where you are setting what your depth of field is and the camera is choosing the rest. And then there's also shutter speed priority, where the camera is choosing the shutter speed, and then or you're choosing the shutter speed, excuse me, and the camera is choosing aperture ISO to make that exposure correct. So there's a couple different options there as far as settings, but if you're in a really low light scenario, bumping up that ISO is what you'd need to do, and then get the shutter speed as low as possible, with still not showing blur, and then that aperture can come down as well. Does that make sense?
Thank you so much. I sincerely appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem, Lauren. Thanks for your question.
That's so great. We are running low on time, just a few more minutes, but Charlotte asked in the chat, what's your advice for someone to practice photography more seriously? I have a Nikon, but feel overwhelmed on the settings and technicalities, so I usually revert back to my iPhone, sadly.
Yeah, I know. Honestly, just shoot as much as your heart desires. The more you get, practice with it, the more you get used to the settings on your camera, the more you understand what they do in different scenarios. And I know it's so easy to go back to the iPhone because it's always automatic. Although hopefully some people now know that you can choose aperture settings on your iPhone. But yeah, just, really, practice in different light, see how light hits different objects, and play around with it. And yeah, enjoy photography and do it in a way that's no pressure scenarios. I feel like that's the best way that we learn, is when we photograph subjects that we really enjoy. Yeah, just keep shooting, Charlotte.
Thank you so much. Thank you for presenting today, Michelle, and thank you all for joining us. I'm going to throw a few links in the chat on just different things. Sorry, that looks really weird because I copy and pasted it, but we've got our media space link that will be where this workshop was recorded, and we'll have that up as soon as the transcriptions are finished for you all to review. And we will also have Michelle's wonderful slide deck, so you can kind of reference that as we go as well on there. And then we have our calendar for our future workshops if you're interested in that, and then also our WebCon website, so you can reference that as well. And that's all I have. Do you have anything else, Bridget, you wanted to add?
I was just going to say, if you join us in January and February, we have 2 back-to-back workshops for Google Analytics 4 and privacy and data analytics. So if you're interested in either of those topics, we've got 2 workshops coming up that are just for you. Happy holidays, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.